Renna Voss had stolen many things in her life, but never anything that made gods nervous. You want me to break into the most heavily guarded chamber in the known systems, during the biggest ceremony of the decade, to damage the single most important artifact in human civilization? She laughed, tapping her neural implant to make sure it was recording this conversation for posterity. Or for evidence at her inevitable trial. And they call me crazy. The man across from her, Kepler was the only name he'd provided, didn't laugh. His eyes were augmented, an expensive mod that gave them a metallic sheen, like quicksilver that couldn't quite settle. We're offering 8 million credits. For now, for when it's done. The bar around them pulsed with low-frequency music designed to scramble surveillance. Orbital Station Lumina was famous for its discretion, hovering at the edge of High King's territory where the monarchy's reach was weakest. Renna took a sip of her synth whiskey, savoring the programmed burn. The stuff was meant to simulate a 30-year aged Earth whiskey without the actual alcohol. She needed her senses sharp. The crown isn't just a fancy hat, she said. It's an integrated neural network connecting 17 planetary systems. Do you have any idea what would happen if it malfunctioned? Kepler's liquid metal eyes didn't blink. That's precisely why we want it disabled. Temporarily. You're really not going to tell me who "we" is, are you? The Tech Liberation Guild is a known entity, Ms. Voss. Renna snorted. The TLG had been gaining popularity in the outer systems. Engineers, scientists, and free-thinkers who believed humans had ceded too much control to the integrated AI systems that the High King's crown coordinated. They weren't terrorists, exactly. More like philosophical extremists with very good engineering degrees. You don't need the best thief in the system for a political statement, she said. You could hire any schmuck with a disruptor. We don't want it destroyed. We want it recalibrated. We need someone who can get past the psychometric barriers. Someone whose brain patterns won't trigger the crown's defenses. That made Renna pause. Few people knew about her peculiar neurological structure, the reason she could slip past most AI security systems undetected. It was a rare genetic quirk combined with some questionable black market neural mods she'd had done as a teenager. How exactly do you know about that? She asked, voice dropping dangerously low. Kepler finally smiled. We have resources. And we've been watching you for some time. Great. Just great. The ceremony is in 3 days, he continued. The celestial alignment only happens once every 24 years, and it's the only time the crown is vulnerable. The High King removes it for recalibration as the 7 moons align. Renna closed her eyes, already calculating angles, access points, guard rotations. Against her better judgment, she was intrigued. The High King's palace on New Terra was a technological marvel, a floating fortress powered by atmospheric conversion. The crown chamber would be at its center, surrounded by layers of security that mixed ancient traditions with cutting-edge tech. What exactly am I supposed to do to it? And don't give me some vague recalibration nonsense. Kepler slid a data chip across the table. This contains a code sequence. Upload it during the recalibration process. It will create a temporary disruption, 48 hours at most, that will separate the 17 systems from central control. And then what? Mass chaos? Financial collapse? Because that's what happens when you mess with infrastructure, and the crown is basically the infrastructure of civilization at this point. Then humans make decisions for themselves again, if only briefly. That's all we want. To remind people what that feels like. Renna pocketed the chip. She hadn't agreed yet, but 8 million credits could buy her a new identity on one of the unregulated worlds beyond the Kuiper expanse. She'd been wanting to disappear for a while now. What's to stop me from taking your down payment and vanishing? Your curiosity, Kepler said simply. You want to know if you can do it. And you want to know what happens next. Damn him for being right. The palace floated 3,000 meters above New Terra's capital city, a sprawling metropolis that still bore architectural echoes of old Earth. Renna stood on a commercial transport platform, disguised as a technician for the ceremony. Her credentials had cost her a small fortune from a forger on Europa, but they'd scan as legitimate unless subjected to the highest level of scrutiny. Remember, no weaponry of any kind, the security AI announced as passengers prepared to board the gravity lifts. All visitors will undergo biomolecular scanning. Any augmentations must be registered and approved. Renna smiled to herself. Her augmentations were specially designed to appear standard issue to any scan. The security systems would see only what she wanted them to see, the neural implants of a mid-level technician, not the cutting-edge perception enhancements that allowed her to process information 10 times faster than a normal human. As the gravity lift carried her upward, the city shrank beneath her. Her stomach lurched, not from the motion, but from the growing realization of what she was about to attempt. Breaking into a royal vault was one thing. Tampering with the technology that held human civilization together was another entirely. Having second thoughts, she muttered to herself. Too late now. The palace grew larger above her, its impossible architecture defying conventional physics. Spires of crystalline material twisted into shapes that seemed to fold into themselves, catching sunlight and refracting it in patterns that mesmerized. That was intentional, of course. The visual distraction made it harder for visitors to map the palace's layout. But Renna had studied architectural scans for days. Behind the bewildering facade was a logical structure, and at its heart lay the crown chamber. Technicians report to central processing, a voice announced as the lift docked. Renna followed a group of actual technicians, keeping her gait casual and her eyes down. Her implants were already scanning, mapping guard positions and security protocols against the intel she'd memorized. 3 anomalies immediately. Guard rotation increased by 20%. New biometric checkpoints. And, most concerning, what appeared to be perception auditors stationed at key junctions. Perception auditors were rare and expensive. Specialized humans with implants designed to detect other augmented individuals. The royal security force must have been tipped off that something might happen during the ceremony. Renna felt sweat bead at her temples but kept walking. Abort? No. This might be the only chance to access the crown. And she'd already spent the advance payment on preparations and bribes. She joined the line for central processing, where technicians received their assignments. When she reached the front, a bored-looking royal administrator barely glanced at her credentials. Atmospheric stabilization, level 12, section C, he said, stamping her work order. Report to Supervisor Callie. Perfect. Level 12 was only 2 levels below the crown chamber. Renna had calculated she'd need to ascend through service tunnels accessed through. Wait. A hand grasped her shoulder. Renna froze, fighting every instinct to run or strike back. She turned slowly. A woman in the silver-trimmed uniform of a perception auditor stood before her, eyes hidden behind reflective implants that covered the upper half of her face. The implants would be running continuous scans of Renna's neural patterns. Your augmentation signature is unusual, the auditor said, head tilting slightly. Renna activated her failsafe, a neural pattern designed to simulate a minor medical condition. Sorry, ma'am. I have recalibration sickness. The doctors say my neural patterns get scrambled during treatment. It's all in my medical file. The auditor frowned. I don't see that here. Oh. Renna feigned surprise and slight embarrassment. It might be under my birth name, Renna Koval, not Voss. Administrative error that never got fixed. A long moment passed as the auditor presumably searched records. Renna maintained the simulated neural pattern, a trick that had saved her multiple times over the years. Finally, the auditor nodded. Proceed. But report to medical after your shift for proper registration. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. As Renna walked away, she let out the breath she'd been holding. That had been close, too close. The security was even tighter than she'd anticipated. If the TLG had inside information about the Crown's vulnerabilities during the celestial alignment, it stood to reason that the Royal Security Forces might have similar intelligence about potential threats. She reached level 12 and located Supervisor Callie, a harried-looking woman coordinating a team ensuring the atmosphere remained perfectly balanced throughout the ceremony. Another one? Fine. Monitor stations 3 through 7. Alert me to any fluctuations above 0.03%. Callie barely looked at her as she handed over an atmospheric sensor. Renna took up position at the monitoring station, eyes darting to the chronometer on the wall. 4 hours until the ceremony began. 3 hours and 50 minutes until she needed to be in position above the crown chamber. As she pretended to work, she mentally traced her route through the service tunnels. According to her intel, there would be a 12-second window when the crown would be removed from the High King's head and placed on the recalibration dais. During those 12 seconds, its defenses would be at their most vulnerable, though vulnerable was a relative term when discussing the most advanced piece of technology humans had ever created. Hey, you see that? The technician beside her pointed at his readout. Oxygen levels in Section D just jumped 0.02%. Within parameters, Renna replied automatically, having actually noticed the fluctuation herself. Probably just increased occupancy as guests arrive. The technician nodded, impressed. Good eye. You worked the previous alignment? No, first time. Renna gave a self-deprecating smile. Hoping not to screw up. You'll be fine. Nothing ever happens during these things except a lot of pomp and old rich people getting drunk on real alcohol. If only he knew. 2 hours passed in mundane work. Renna played her part perfectly while plotting her move. When a minor atmospheric fluctuation drew the team's attention to the east wing, she slipped away, citing a bathroom break. Instead of heading to the facilities, she ducked into a maintenance corridor and quickly located the access panel she needed. Her augmented perception slowed her experience of time as she worked, making each second feel like 10. She disabled the panel's alarm, removed it, and slipped into the narrow passage beyond. The service tunnels were cramped and hot, designed for maintenance drones rather than humans. Renna's slight build was an advantage here as she crawled upward, navigating by memory. One level up. Then another. Sweat soaked through her uniform, but she didn't dare stop. Finally, she reached the small observation port she'd identified in the palace schematics. From here, she could see into the crown chamber from above, a position that wouldn't be visible to the ceremonial guards or attendees. The chamber was enormous, a cathedral-like space with walls of shifting light that displayed real-time data from all 17 connected systems. Billions of lives, represented as flowing streams of information. At the center stood a dais of what appeared to be pure white marble but was actually a quantum-stable material that helped maintain the crown's incredible processing power. And there, entering with a procession of officials and dignitaries, was the High King himself. Even from her hidden position, Renna could see the crown gleaming on his head, a deceptively simple circlet of silvery metal that contained more computing power than entire planets had possessed in earlier eras. She checked her chronometer. 30 minutes until the celestial alignment reached its apex. 30 minutes until the crown would be removed. As she waited, watching the ceremony unfold, something unexpected happened. The data streams on the walls began to pulse in unison, 7 pulses, like 7 heartbeats. The gathered dignitaries gasped in what seemed like wonder or reverence. What the hell? Renna whispered. The data streams, representing trillions of human lives and activities across 17 systems, had never synchronized like this before, at least not according to any records she'd studied. Something was happening that wasn't in her briefing. The High King raised his hands, and his amplified voice filled the chamber. The gods are watching. A chill ran down Renna's spine. The gods were supposedly just a religious metaphor used by the monarchy to explain the higher functions of the crown, its ability to optimize resources and predict outcomes for maximum human benefit. The Tech Liberation Guild dismissed such talk as superstition used to maintain power. But there was something about those pulsing data streams that made Renna uneasy. The celestial alignment approached its apex. The High King knelt on the dais as attendants approached. With practiced movements, they carefully lifted the crown from his head. Time seemed to slow for Renna. This was the moment. The crown's defenses would be briefly inactive during the transition to the recalibration stand. She had to move now. She slid open the observation port and dropped silently into the shadows at the edge of the chamber. Her augmented perception gave her perfect awareness of every guard's position, every witness's sightline. There was a path to the dais, difficult but not impossible. As she moved, blending between guests and using their elaborate ceremonial attire as cover, she caught fragments of conversation. Never seen the patterns align like this. They say the gods are unusually attentive this cycle. Rumors of separatist activity. She reached the outer edge of the dais just as the crown was placed upon its recalibration stand. Now came the truly impossible part. She needed to get close enough to upload the TLG's code sequence without being seen by hundreds of witnesses or detected by whatever security measures protected the crown even during recalibration. Renna had one advantage. She discovered in her research that the crown's quantum detection field had a blind spot directly below, where the recalibration equipment connected to the dais. If she could access that connection point, she could upload the code undetected. She slipped beneath the dais, finding the maintenance access exactly where the schematics had shown it would be. Above her, she could hear the High King beginning the ceremonial invocation. As the 7 moons align, we honor the covenant between humanity and the higher intelligences that guide us. For 24 years, the crown has maintained peace and prosperity across 17 worlds. Renna tuned out the speech and focused on the task at hand. She connected her neural implant to the recalibration system, not directly to the crown, which would have detected her instantly, but to the supporting systems that fed it information during the recalibration process. This was the moment of truth. She began uploading the code sequence Kepler had provided. And then she saw it. Her augmented perception could interpret the data flows in ways normal humans couldn't. She could see the patterns within patterns, the deep structure of the crown's operations. And what she saw made her blood run cold. The crown wasn't just a sophisticated AI network. It was a communication system, a two-way interface with something else. Something that existed beyond normal spacetime. Something that was, right now, during this celestial alignment, unusually active. The gods weren't a metaphor after all. "Oh shit," Renna whispered. "What am I doing?" But it was too late. The upload was complete. The code sequence had been integrated into the recalibration process. Whatever was going to happen next was already in motion. Above her, the High King's voice faltered. The data streams on the walls froze, then fragmented into chaotic patterns. Gasps and cries of alarm filled the chamber. The crown was broken. And somewhere beyond normal perception, something vast and incomprehensible had taken notice. Renna's augmented senses overloaded as reality itself seemed to buckle around the crown chamber. The data streams that had been flowing smoothly across the walls were now fracturing, splitting into 7 distinct patterns that fought against each other like rival currents. Guards shouted. Dignitaries screamed. The High King stood frozen on the dais, his face a mask of horror as he stared at the crown, which now emitted a high-pitched whine that made Renna's teeth ache. Containment protocols. Someone shouted. Lock down the chamber. That was her cue to leave. Renna scrambled from beneath the dais, ready to blend back into the chaos and escape before the lockdown trapped her. But as she emerged, her gaze locked with the High King's. He knew. Somehow, through whatever connection he shared with the crown, he knew exactly what she had done and who she was. Seize her, he said, his voice barely audible over the growing chaos, yet carrying a weight of authority that cut through the noise. Renna ran. Her augmented perception calculated escape routes, tracking guard movements and identifying choke points. She slipped between panicking dignitaries, using their expensive ceremonial attire as cover while accessing the same maintenance shaft she'd used to enter. Behind her, she heard the distinctive hum of neural disruptors powering up, weapons designed to temporarily overload augmented neural systems like hers. One hit and she'd be unconscious, her brain temporarily rewired. The TLG set me up, she realized as she crawled frantically through the maintenance shaft. They hadn't just wanted to disrupt the crown, they'd wanted her caught in the act. A public scapegoat for whatever was happening now. As she reached the access panel on level 12, her neural implant chimed with an incoming communication. She almost ignored it, but the encryption signature was one she recognized: Kepler. "What the hell did you make me do?" she hissed, accepting the connection as she burst from the maintenance shaft into an empty corridor. "You've witnessed them, haven't you?" Kepler's voice was tense with excitement. "The entities. The intelligence beyond. You set me up, you bastard. We needed someone with your unique neural architecture. The crown's connection to the higher intelligence works through a quantum entanglement that most human brains can't comprehend. But yours, with its unusual structure, could serve as a temporary bridge." Renna froze. A bridge to what? "They've been watching us for millennia. Guiding us. The High Kings called them gods because they didn't have better language. We call them interdimensional observers. They exist outside our conventional space-time and have been using the crown as an interface to nudge human development." Alarms blared throughout the palace. Renna ducked into a service alcove as a squadron of royal guards thundered past. "You didn't just want to disrupt the crown," she said, realization dawning. "You wanted to communicate with them directly. For generations, the monarchy has monopolized contact. They've kept humanity dependent on the crown's guidance while presenting themselves as the only worthy intermediaries. The code you uploaded didn't just break the crown's connection, it redirected it. Our best minds are attempting communication now." Renna felt suddenly, terribly small. She'd been used as a pawn in a game played across dimensions. "I need to get off this palace," she said. "Now. Head to docking bay 7. We have people there who can extract you." "Why should I trust you?" "Because we need you alive, Renna. Your neural architecture is the key." The upload was just phase 1. She ended the communication and sprinted toward the nearest gravity lift, her mind racing. The TLG wanted to democratize access to these gods, these interdimensional observers. But what if the monarchy had good reasons for controlling that access? What if unfiltered communication with entities that existed outside normal spacetime was dangerous? As the gravity lift descended, carrying her toward the docking bays, the palace lights flickered. Through the transparent walls of the lift, she could see New Terra's capital city below, and something was very wrong. Patterns of light moved through the city in geometric progressions, forming and reforming like a visual language. The 7 moons, visible in the daylight sky during the celestial alignment, seemed to pulse in sequence with these patterns. Her neural implant pinged with emergency broadcasts from all 17 systems. The crown's disruption wasn't just affecting the palace, it was cascading through the entire network of connected worlds. Alert, synchronization failure across all systems. Gravitational anomalies detected in sectors 3, 7, and 12. Quantum fluctuations affecting stability of connected networks. The lift shuddered to a halt between floors. Emergency power only. Renna pried open the doors and squeezed through the gap, finding herself in a corridor filled with panicking palace staff. "What's happening?" she asked, grabbing the arm of a passing technician. "The crown's connection was severed during recalibration," the woman said, her face pale with shock. "All 17 systems are reverting to independent function without the coordinating intelligence." "Is that bad?" The technician gave her an incredulous look. Our infrastructure has been optimized by the Crown for generations. Transportation systems, resource allocation, energy distribution, none of it works efficiently without central coordination. And that's not even considering the stabilizing effect it had on our gravitational engineering. Renna let her go, a cold realization settling in her stomach. The TLG had massively underestimated the consequences. They'd thought they were striking a blow for human autonomy, but they'd failed to understand how deeply integrated the Crown's influence had become. She pushed her way through the crowds toward docking Bay 7. Emergency protocols would be closing all exits soon. If she didn't get off the palace now, she might never leave except in restraints, or a body bag. As she reached the docking bay, a hand yanked her into a side corridor. She reacted instantly, twisting to break the grip, but stopped when she recognized Kepler's metallic eyes. "You," she snarled. "There's no time," he said. "The situation is more complex than we anticipated." "You don't say." He pulled her toward a small, unmarked shuttle docked apart from the main vessels. "The observers are attempting direct communication now that the Crown's filtering mechanism is disrupted. But the data streams are too intense for most human neural systems to process." "Most human neural systems," Renna repeated. "But not mine. Your unique architecture. Save it. You just needed someone to take the fall when things went wrong. What's happening out there?" She gestured toward the viewport, where new Terra cities were now visibly affected by strange geometric light patterns. Kepler's artificial eyes reflected the chaotic patterns. The observers exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their perception and communication methods don't translate well to our limited three-dimensional experience. Without the Crown's translation matrix. The palace shuddered again. Through the viewport, Renna could see one of New Terra's 7 moons visibly shift in its orbit, an impossibility given the gravitational constants that should have bound it. "They're trying to help," Kepler insisted. "But direct communication is causing perceptual distortions in our reality." "Help? This doesn't look like help." Renna gestured to the emergency broadcast still flooding her neural implant. Reports of gravitational anomalies, time dilation effects, and mass communication failures across all 17 systems. "Get on the shuttle," Kepler said. "We need to get you to our facility. You can serve as an interpreter, a bridge between our consciousness and theirs." Renna hesitated. Every instinct told her to run as far from this mess as possible. Use the chaos to disappear beyond the reach of both the monarchy and the TLG. But the scope of the disaster unfolding across 17 worlds gave her pause. Billions of lives disrupted because she'd agreed to take a job without understanding its true implications. "If I help you communicate with them," she said slowly, "can we restore stability?" "We believe so. Their intentions aren't hostile, they've been guiding human development for millennia. But they perceive reality differently. Time, space, causality. These concepts don't bind them the way they bind us." Another emergency alert flashed in her neural feed, orbital stability failing on 3 outer system planets. Evacuation protocols initiated. "Fine," she said. "But I want the full 8 million credits, not just the second half. And safe passage beyond the Kuiper expanse afterward." Kepler nodded. "Agreed." They boarded the shuttle just as Royal Security Forces burst into the docking bay. The small vessel detached and accelerated away from the palace with suspicious speed and maneuverability, clearly modified beyond legal limits. As they broke atmosphere, Renna got her first full view of the 7 moons. They had shifted from their alignment, moving into a new geometric pattern that seemed to pulse with meaning. The shuttle's communication system crackled with distress calls from across the system. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked. "Europa Outpost," Kepler replied. "Our primary research facility is hidden beneath the ice. It's the only place with equipment sophisticated enough to attempt controlled communication." Renna studied his profile. You're not human, are you? Kepler's metallic eyes shifted to her. Not entirely, no. The TLG believes in enhancement. Evolution through technology. So the monarchy restricts access to the observers, and you want to, what? Become like them? We want to understand them. Learn from them. The monarchy has kept humanity in a comfortable cage, dependent on the crown's guidance while stifling our true potential. The shuttle jumped to FTL speed, the stars blurring around them. Renna felt a strange pressure building in her mind, like a presence hovering just beyond conscious perception. They're aware of you, Kepler said, noticing her discomfort. Your neural architecture registers as a potential communication node. Great, Renna muttered. Interdimensional entities are sending me friend requests. The pressure increased, becoming almost painful. Fragmented images flashed through her mind, geometric patterns, impossible structures, concepts that human language couldn't articulate. What do they want? She gasped. That's what we need to find out. Kepler's voice seemed distant now, competing with the strange sensations overwhelming Renna's perception. The crown filtered their influence, translating their guidance into forms human consciousness could comprehend. Without that filter, the shuttle dropped out of FTL near Jupiter, its massive form dominating the viewport. Europa gleamed like a pearl in the gas giant's shadow. But Renna could barely focus on the view. The presence in her mind was growing stronger, more insistent. Small fragment, a voice that wasn't a voice seemed to say within her consciousness. Temporary node. Limited perspective. We see you seeing us seeing you. They're talking to me, she whispered. Kepler leaned forward, suddenly intense. What are they saying? It's not exactly saying. More like concepts unfolding. She struggled to translate the alien thoughts into human language. They're curious. Concerned. Something about perspective limitations. The shuttle began its approach to Europa, but Renna barely noticed. Her consciousness seemed to be expanding beyond her physical form, perceiving reality from multiple angles simultaneously. She saw the 17 systems not as separate worlds connected by technology, but as a single organism, with the crown as its central nervous system. The crown wasn't controlling us, she realized aloud. It was coordinating us. Helping us function as parts of a greater whole. That's the monarchy's propaganda, Kepler said dismissively. They want us to believe we need their guidance. But Renna wasn't listening to him anymore. The observers were showing her something, the consequences of the crown's disruption unfolding across multiple possible futures. In every scenario where the connection remained broken, the 17 systems descended into chaos. Not just technological failure, but a deeper fracturing of human civilization. We're not ready, she whispered. We can't handle direct contact. The shuttle docked at what appeared to be an abandoned research station on Europa's surface. Kepler led her through airlocks and down lifts, deeper beneath the ice moon's frozen exterior. The TLG facility was impressive, cutting-edge technology arranged around a central chamber that hummed with power. This is our interface attempt, Kepler explained, gesturing to a chair surrounded by neural connection apparatus. We've been trying to establish direct communication for years, but we needed someone with your unique neural structure to bridge the gap. Renna approached the chair cautiously. The presence in her mind had become a constant pressure, a vast intelligence trying to squeeze itself into her limited human awareness. If I do this, she said, I want your promise that we'll try to restore the crown's function. The observers are showing me what happens if we don't, and it's not good. Kepler's expression hardened. We didn't go through all this just to put humans back in their comfortable cage. It's not a cage, Renna insisted. It's a translation layer. The observers exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their perception of reality is fundamentally different from ours. The crown wasn't controlling humanity, it was translating their guidance into forms we could comprehend without our brains melting. Their guidance, Kepler repeated skeptically. You mean their control? Renna shook her head, frustrated. You're not listening. They don't think in terms of control. They experience time non-linearly. They see human civilization as a single entity evolving across space-time. They've been trying to help us evolve toward a state where we can perceive reality more like they do. By keeping us dependent on the crown. By giving us training wheels. Renna snapped. Look what's happening now that those wheels are off, 17 systems in chaos, gravitational anomalies, time distortions. We're like children who've been given nuclear weapons before we understand physics. A tremor ran through the facility. Europa's orbit, like the orbits of all moons in the 17 systems, was becoming unstable without the crown's subtle gravitational corrections. Before Kepler could respond, the facility's alarms blared. A technician burst into the room. Multiple ships entering the Jupiter system. Royal insignia. How did they find us so quickly? Kepler demanded. Renna knew. The observers had guided them here, not out of malice, but out of a desire to restore balance. From their multidimensional perspective, the events unfolding now had already happened, were happening, and would happen simultaneously. We need to restore the crown, she said firmly. Now. Kepler hesitated, conflict visible in his metallic eyes. Finally, he nodded to the neural interface chair. Do what you can. Renna sat in the chair, allowing the neural connections to attach to her implants. The moment the system activated, her consciousness expanded explosively. The observers weren't just communicating with her, they were using her unique neural architecture as a temporary replacement for the crown's translation matrix. Through her, they could once again perceive human civilization in ways that made sense to their multidimensional awareness. And through them, she could see the entire structure of the 17 systems as a single entity across space and time. They don't want to control us, she gasped, her physical body trembling with the effort of channeling such vast awareness. They're more like gardeners. They create conditions for growth, but each species develops according to its own nature. Kepler was saying something, but his words seemed trivial compared to the vast understanding flowing through her mind. Renna could see the crown now, not just as a physical object, but as a nexus point where multiple dimensions intersected, where the observer's perception could be translated into forms that human consciousness could integrate without destruction. I need to get back to the crown, she managed to say. I can fix what I broke. The royal forces will execute you on sight, Kepler warned. Not if the observers don't want them to. With tremendous effort, Renna pulled her awareness back into her physical form. They've been guiding both sides of this conflict. The monarchy and the TLG are just different approaches to the same evolutionary process. The facility shook again as Europa's orbital instability worsened. Time was running out. You need to surrender to the royal forces, she told Kepler. Tell them what happened. Tell them I can restore the crown's function. They'll never believe. They will, Renna interrupted. Because the High King knows what the crown really is. He's experienced the observer's guidance directly. Against all his revolutionary principles, Kepler agreed. The facility's defensive systems were deactivated, and the royal forces boarded without resistance. To Renna's surprise, they were led not by security personnel but by the High King himself. He approached her, his eyes reflecting the same expanded awareness she now experienced. You've become a conduit, he said simply. Not by choice, Renna replied. But I understand now. I can fix what I broke. The celestial alignment is ending, the High King warned. The quantum entanglement that allows the crown to function as a translation matrix is weakening. If the connection isn't restored before the alignment ends completely, then take me to it. Now. The return journey to New Terra's palace was tense, the royal vessel pushing its engines to maximum capacity. Through viewport windows, Renna could see the spreading effects of the crown's disruption, gravitational anomalies distorting space, communication networks failing, automated systems across 17 worlds operating without their coordinating intelligence. When they reached the crown chamber, it was eerily empty, evacuated during the crisis. The crown itself still sat on its recalibration stand, now dark and dormant. "What do you need?" the High King asked. "Just time," Renna replied, approaching the crown. "And maybe forgiveness afterward." She lifted the crown carefully, the metal cool against her fingers. The observer's presence in her mind intensified, guiding her actions. With their help, she reversed the code sequence she had uploaded, but with modifications, improvements that the observers had shown her. The crown wasn't perfect, she explained as she worked. The observers have been trying to refine the translation matrix for generations, but change must happen gradually or human consciousness rejects it. The High King nodded. Each monarch experiences this understanding differently. "We serve as temporary conduits, much as you are now. But you monopolized the connection," Renna said. The TLG wasn't entirely wrong. The benefits weren't equally distributed. "A necessary limitation," the High King replied. "Most human minds cannot handle direct exposure to multidimensional awareness. Your own unique neural architecture is already showing signs of strain." He was right. Renna could feel her consciousness fraying at the edges as she channeled the observer's guidance. Blood trickled from her nose, her vision blurring at the edges. The crown began to glow in her hands as the recalibration completed. The data streams on the chamber walls gradually reactivated, flowing once again in harmonious patterns rather than chaotic fragments. "It's working," the High King breathed. Renna placed the crown on his head, completing the circuit. The translation matrix reconnected, and immediately the pressure in her mind eased as the observer's presence flowed back through its proper channel. The High King gasped, his eyes widening as the full awareness returned to him. "They've shown you the truth," he said, looking at Renna with new understanding. "Parts of it," she replied. "Enough to know that neither your approach nor the TLG's was entirely right. The observers don't want worshippers or revolutionaries, they want partners in evolution." Around them, the palace stabilized as the crown resumed its subtle corrections to gravitational fields and energy distributions across the 17 systems. Emergency broadcasts began reporting resolutions to the cascading failures. "What happens to me now?" Renna asked. "Execution for high treason." The High King smiled slightly. "The observers have other plans for you. Your neural architecture presents opportunities." "I'm not interested in becoming anyone's permanent conduit," Renna said firmly. "Not a conduit. A translator." The TLG was right that access to the observer's guidance should be more widely distributed. But they underestimated the dangers of unfiltered contact. Renna understood. "You want me to help create additional translation matrices. Smaller versions of the crown that could extend its network without overwhelming human consciousness." "The next step in our guided evolution," the High King confirmed. "If you're willing." Renna thought about the 8 million credits she'd been promised, about her plans to disappear beyond the Kuiper expanse. But after experiencing the vast perspective of the observers, those ambitions seemed small and limited. "I broke your crown," she said. "Seems only fair that I help build new ones." The High King extended his hand, and Renna took it. A thief and a king united by their shared glimpse of something greater than either of them. And somewhere beyond normal perception, the vast intelligences that humans called gods relaxed their vigilance, satisfied that the brief crisis had been resolved. Their long project continued, guiding humanity step by careful step toward a future where no translation would be necessary, where humans themselves might one day perceive reality in all its multidimensional glory. Renna felt the last whisper of their presence as the connection through her mind faded completely. Not a goodbye, for they existed beyond linear time. More of an acknowledgement, one fragment of consciousness recognizing another across the vast divide of perception. In breaking the High King's crown, she had glimpsed the gods. And now, like them, she would help others to see.